Hey guys, so I want to offer some suggestions for folks who are thinking of getting their first houseplants and are contemplating getting succulents. Now, there are lots of great options out there, but I wanted to highlight a few of my favorites. Now, before we get into my plant lineup that I have here, I wanted to offer a few tips in advance. Firstly, most succulents, including the ones I'm going to highlight here today, would appreciate a brighter light condition, like on a sunny windowsill or under a grow light. They are not really plants for the interior or a dark space in your bathroom, for instance. However, the ones I am going to highlight are succulents that I've found are more accepting of less than highlight conditions, and I'll explain the reason when I showcase each one. Now, first one on my list is Gasteria, otherwise known as ox tongue, for what I suppose is for obvious reasons. If you've ever stared down the mouth of a yawning bovine, or if you've ever done your fair share of cow canoodling or cow cuddling. What's it called in Dutch, Sander? Cow?
Koeknuffelen. I don't even know.
Canoofling?
I don't even know if it's a thing, but you'll have to double check.
Yeah, it's like cow canoofling or something like that. Anyway, it's got this cool fan-shaped and leaf structure, and because these are typically darker succulents, now I have here that is one that has some yellow variegation, but you could see this one right here that doesn't have any type of yellow variegation. But because they have a little bit more of this fan-shaped structure, they don't really etiolate, which is a word which means to stretch out and get lanky. They do actually do fine pulled slightly away from a very bright sunny window. So keep in mind that these plants have these thick succulent leaves, and they also have these thick succulent roots. So watering them is not going to be such a hassle, because if you do a thorough watering on them, then you can really wait until the medium dries out quite a bit before considering watering again. And some of my Gasteria, you'll notice that I actually have this kind of rockier type of substrate, which is great for succulents. Now, next up is a succulent that I really think goes hand in hand with Gasteria, and that is Haworthiopsis. And these are formerly known as Haworthia, but these are also known as fairy washboards, again for obvious reasons, because if you've ever seen the tooth fairy washing her dirty clothes after leaving you $1 bill under your pillow for the tooth that you got knocked out, well then you know that she's using something that looks like this. Or you know not to drink whatever you were drinking before you went to bed that night. Either one, it's a toss-up. But yeah, these are known as Haworthiopsis or fairy washboards, and they have this kind of ripples and rippled shapes around their leaves, which are pretty cool. But unlike Gasteria, these are more in a rosette, but they do still have that kind of dark green hue, which leads me to believe that it's more comfortable slightly pulled away from a bright, sunny windowsill. And actually, a lot of Gasteria and Haworthiopsis prefer to grow under the shade of like larger desert-dwelling plants, so it's not uncommon finding them under a bush or something like that. So they would actually prefer to be in more dappled light versus in direct sun. And I found that the ones that I sometimes will put in direct sun will actually start to kind of tighten up and will get a darker hue because they're probably getting a little bit more sun scorched. And that often causes like this bleaching of the leaves, or causes maybe even some necrotic or dead areas because it's damaging the chlorophyll of the leaves. Now, next up is aloe. Now, I think many of us, when we're familiar with aloe vera, and this one is a funny one that I have that you probably have seen from 365 Days of Plants. It's growing in a weird way, and I have an offset coming up from here. So, and they definitely are prolific plants. But I also have one that is a unique one. This is called Aloe Sidewinder. And you can see that they have really beautiful marks on it, and hybrids and cultivars. There's lots of different ones that are pretty cool. Now, aloe vera, which I just showed you, that is a plant where you could like break a leaf off and apply that gel to a sunburn to soothe your skin, but there are so many great aloes, as you can see here. And not only a lot of cool species, but like I said, just really neat hybrids and cultivars, which, and also even intergeneric hybrids, which means that they cross between two different genera, like Aloe and Gasteria. So here is an example of that. This is actually one of my favorite intergeneric crosses right here. And this is like a Gasteraloe, so that means it's crossed with a Gasteria and an Aloe. And it's very unusual, and to my knowledge, it doesn't set viable seeds. However, there are a lot of different species crosses too, and some ones that have like really cool markings. And I don't think I have any of those that I have here, but you could just see from like a pan of the ones that I just showed you, the leaf structures and the leaf colors and the markings are really, really gorgeous. So aloe, like Gasteria and Haworthia, I found can be grown in less than full sun, but they definitely will thrive more in fuller sun conditions. So depending on the species or cultivar, you will have noticeable spikes along the edges as well. So just be careful around them. I mean, aloe vera, it's really not that bad, but if you're wearing kind of like a loose sweater or if you're quite sensitive to certain plants, then aloe can sometimes have those hard spikes on them that will actually cut you a little bit. So just be a little bit more mindful. Okay, so next up is the Old Faithful snake plant. And there are so many different species and cultivars of snake plants out there. And in the plant market, they are known as Sansevieria, but anyone religiously watching my channel will know by now that the name changed to Dracaena. And if you're interested in that nerdy plant stuff, then I'll throw that video in a link above and also below in the description. Now, the ones that you'll likely see are a little bit more tall ones. This is kind of mid-range one. This is known as, I guess, Sansevieria Whitney, but it's probably now Dracaena Whitney, so it's a different type of cultivar. So you'll see it has like these mottlings, this beautiful mottling around the edge and like a really dark center. And these are versions of Dracaena trifasciata or Sansevieria trifasciata, which are those long, tall snake plants. But there are also ones that I'd like to highlight today that are more succulent ones, like Dracaena angolensis. I got this one, and it's a kind of a miniature version. So this one was formerly known as Sansevieria cylindrica, and this is a different type of variation, and they grow really, really, really tiny. But there are a bunch of dwarf varieties that I think would actually be perfect for folks. And like this one is now known as Dracaena singularis, which used to be called Sansevieria fisheri. And you can see that this one is a little bit more shaped like a gutter even. So it's got these really, really thick leaves, and you could see that it kind of sprawls out this way versus one that actually grows up. Now I should stop here and I should say that all the ones that I have featured previously reproduce similarly to one another, and that is by producing these clonal offsets off the mother plant. I think you could actually see it best here in this aloe sidewinder. You'll see like these little ones, these little baby pups that are kind of emerging here. And these emerge from the underground on the stem, so you could see examples of that also here in the aloe vera. And all these little baby plants can either be separated off or allowed to form as clumps. Now, another succulent that produces offsets, albeit in different kind of way, is kalanchoe, and this is this plant known as kind of mother of thousands or mother of millions. And don't pay attention to the one behind it, pay attention to this one. And what's funny about this is that these little baby offsets that grow on the tips of these leaves fall down in every single container that I have and then just start to grow up. So I didn't plant this kalanchoe in here, it actually planted itself. So, and I actually got this plant because I saved it from a store that was going out of business and it was under construction. And I actually write about this plant in my book, How to Make a Plant Love You, but I took over a dozen stems of this plant and you could see it producing offsets all along the leaf margins. And this is really a young one, so it's just starting to kind of like pup up along the leaf margins. And that's why it's called mother of thousands or mother of millions. So this is part of the reason why I think this plant is so rewarding for any beginner, because it gives you so many offsets, but then they volunteer in just about anything it could drop its roots into. So it definitely needs a little bit more full sun conditions. I had one that I pulled back away from, kind of full sun conditions, and it started to really get lanky, and it will get lanky, and you could always just cut these back and then just stick them right back down in the soil. These things are really hard to kill. So again, it makes it a really good beginner plant. All right, so my final selection is a bit of an unusual one that pays homage to more of the green stick plant fetish, and that is Euphorbia. This is an intensely wide-ranging group of plants, but the one that I have here is Euphorbia platyclada, which is known as dead man's fingers. Charming, right? But there's also some other ones that like Euphorbia tiricale, which is known as pencil cactus or fire sticks, which I actually don't have here. But they are they get really red in the sun, and these, of course, are you could see this is like green, but it has some shades of pink. And if you keep this in a little bit more high light, it starts to really redden or pink. I guess more of like a rosy hue. But when you start to pull it away, it starts to go a little bit greener. But I like these plants. I think they're just really mad easy. I will have to say that they are toxic to animals and small children, and they have a latex which exudes out of the stems if they're broken, and that's pretty noxious to your skin or eyes, so you just really have to be careful. But if you know that, then you should be fine. Now, these are, believe it or not, in the same genus as poinsettias, which are, of course, common around Christmas time. So if you ever get poinsettias, then you can probably try your hand at another member of the genus. And I have to say that poinsettias are very hard to keep looking good all season long. They're just really there to be a nice horticultural variety for the Christmas time. But I have to say that other euphorbias are much better kept indoors and maintained over the rest of your life, basically. All right, folks, so these are some of my selects for 6 easy succulents for beginners. There are a lot more than I could have added, but just wanted to start with some of the ones that I think are pretty easy for somebody who's just starting out and actually has the right kind of light in their home. So let me know your other picks in the comments below. And if you like this video, give it a thumbs up and tune back here because I will be here next week. Bye, guys. If you didn't hear yet, we just released Houseplant Basics, which is an introductory mini course for beginner houseplant enthusiasts. The video-based course is set up to be both concise and comprehensive, and it serves as a perfect primer for our Houseplant Masterclass, which is a month-long course on houseplant care, cultivation, and more. You can find out more information on both courses at homesteadbrooklyn.com or search for the courses in the description below.
Tell me a little bit about these bumps. Like, what is that? It looks like it almost has pests or something.
Yeah, I know.
Crawling all over
I
it,
know.
but it's not.
So these are hybrids or cultivars. So they basically are selecting. They're cross-pollinating them.
Yeah.
With different aloes, and some of them might have these raised bumps, and oftentimes, if they have like this type of coloration, it could be. They don't know for sure, but it could actually be more camouflage, and it could be camouflage so that an herbivore looks at it and says can't really see it because it's like a zebra, where like zebras, when they're combined together, they're very hard to know which one is which because they use it as camouflage. Or to your point that it says it looks like insects, it could be camouflaging itself that looks like it has scars or insect eggs on top of it, because typically an insect won't come down and lay their eggs on something if they see that it's already infested with eggs. You know what I mean? Or if it's infested with something that has mined into it. So oftentimes you'll see plants that either mimic their environment or they're using a different type of camouflage in order to be able to fool like potential herbivores, essentially. And it's not that they're trying to fool different herbivores, it just might be that there is some kind of genetic variation and it caused spots, and then that one actually performed the best in the environment and therefore spread its seed more widely, and then that one got selected over time. You know what I'm saying? Right. This one's kind of cool, this Haworthiopsis, this one is actually flowering right here. They don't have like really...
It's like the last of it, right?
Yeah. They don't really have...
This is already flowered.
Yeah, and so it basically flowers from the base all the way up to the top. So it starts from the base and then goes up to the top.
So are these new flowers that are growing?
Those are new.
It will just continue to grow.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So it started here, and then they die out, and then they keep on going to the top. And then this is...
so long.
I know. And then they all will shoot out very long stems of flowers.
And why do they do that?
Oftentimes, if these are hidden like under bushes and things like that, if the flowers are really down below, then it was probably self-selected to insects maybe that don't fly all that much. But this one obviously is
so
for
it's try to get off the ground.
yeah,
so you kind of get hurt.
so that it's like for more pollinators. So this one is white. This Haworthiopsis has a white tubular one. So I would imagine that this will attract like more like a moth maybe at night, and something that has like obviously a proboscis that could go down this long tube. And none of these are in bloom right now, but Gasteria will have similar ones, but very bright pink and red, also with tubes. So that's probably more of a daytime insect or bird or pollinator. And then aloes are usually the most beautiful, and they could come in hues of reds or yellows or anything along those lines. I don't know when you have inter-species cross.
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't know what this flower is going to look like. You know what I mean?
Right.
So because it's not
This is not your typical aloe.
This is something that somebody's bred
Right.
and created.
So you're gonna get a different color potentially.
And then what's interesting is that like the young growth form of aloes will look more like Gasterias. They'll have this fan shape.
Which is this ox tongue.
Yeah.
Plant.
It'll have this fan shape so that when this was young, it probably looked a little bit like this. Maybe not in the colorations or marking, but just the structure. And then as it ages, it starts to become this like rosette, like this. So that's kind of cool. Like
wow,
this.
so you could pick this up and thinking it's one of these, but then eventually
Yeah, I mean, usually, I mean, sometimes, I mean, I think that you could kind of tell them apart. This one, I think, is a little bit harder because this is a Gasteria, but to me, visually looks a little bit more like an aloe, and it's starting to move away from this fan shape. So that's kind
like
of
in between.
Yeah, or that it's like switching its fan shape over this way. So that's kind of interesting. I mean, they don't all follow that.
Right.
Structure, but I think that's but yeah, I think these would be my selects for beginners. I think they're all quite interesting and fun.